All right, do you see that button up there, this blue? All right, right beside. No, don't click. Why did you click on that? Well, I thought you was going to tell me to click on it. No, I was telling you that's where it's at because I need you to see what's beside that. That's where I need you.
Yeah, I have that same problem in my own house.
Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right. Protect your patience. Day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with hip hop. Let's get it right.
All right, today we're going to be talking about breaches, blames, and bad behavior.
And not us.
Blaming. Breach, blame, bad behavior. See, you tried to get me on that one, Donna. I know what you're trying to do.
I did. I'm still going to get you to say it one more time, see if you get tongue tied.
That's a lot of stuff there.
Blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Specifically, we're going to be talking a lot about MSPs today. As a matter of fact,
Yes.
it's the MSPs that were blamed and that were sued and all kind of other stuff. Accused.
And the bad behavior.
Yeah. And the bad behavior. Crazy stuff. Like weird. And then we'll wrap it up with who owns the risk. Oftentimes, you may not know that you're accepting risk until something
Everybody
goes wrong.
needs to understand the concept of shared responsibility.
Yeah. So let's start with an interesting one, if not confusing in a lot of ways. So apparently there was a case where a guy was wandering around a hospital. Not that that's, unusual, but this guy decided to, plug in a USB device and infect the systems at the hospital with malware, which, in and of itself is kind of strange until you also figure out that he is a CEO of a cybersecurity firm.
Yeah, this is the thing that I don't.
It's like, was he?
There's so many questions.
Yeah, my initial thought was, okay, well, maybe he was paid to do that type of engagement, like where you kind of try to go in and all that. But no, it wasn't that. So then I'm like, well, maybe he's trying to get them as a client.
I know.
I don't know.
It's in Oklahoma City. Okay, so here's the quote from the news agency, that the News 9 local media outlet. Security camera footage apparently shows, what's his name? Jeffrey Bowie, the CEO of Veritaco. Veritaco, cybersecurity and private intelligence firm. So who knows? Anyway, they're in Oklahoma City, and they have him back in August on the security camera. So now I got even more questions, because you would know you're on security camera, surely.
Yeah, you'd think.
Yeah. They show wandering around the hospital trying to enter multiple offices until he stumbled on 2 computers on which he allegedly installed malware designed to take a screenshot every 20 minutes and send the images to an outside IP address. And apparently one of the employees saw the activity happening, saw him at the computer.
Right.
And they stopped him, and he was like, "Oh, I'm here visiting a family member and was looking for some place to get to my email," or some kind of crap like that. I saw in some of the coverage, and I'm like, it does. It sounds like somebody that's doing a penetration test, but there's no way they would have gone to the point where they filed charges.
Yeah.
About Oklahoma's Computer Crimes Act. So if they're, they had that case in Iowa where that happened, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very
similar. But it
similar.
wasn't a CEO.
Right. The thing that gets me is, was the computer unlocked? Like how was he even able to do that?
My guess is that he did stumble upon 2 that were used on the floor that weren't unlocked as they would go to the, let's see, August 6th. I wonder if that was a weekend, because that'd be the time to do it.
Yep.
Because you're short staffed, and they go out in, the hallway. They have their computer out in a little cubby. They look something up, and then they go to the patient rooms, and there's like no one there. So I wouldn't be shocked.
That was a Tuesday.
I would be bothered by it, but not shocked. Huh?
Yeah, it was a Tuesday.
Well, see, it wasn't even the weekend, so I don't know. I got nothing but 2 computers. He managed to do it. It got caught on security camera. That would be the thing I would be like so aware. None of this makes sense. So is he being blamed unfairly, or did he actually cause the harm that he's accused of? I mean, that's if they got him on camera doing it, they have the malware that he did. They were able to see it because they had him on camera, and the employee did the right thing.
Yeah.
See something, say something.
Right.
And so all of the actual security worked except for the logo, but they were able to prevent any serious damage because immediately it was found. So
there's something else to the story. I don't know what it is. There's something.
Yeah, only motive is, okay, if he wasn't hired in any way, and they say there's no evidence whatsoever of any kind of connection, personal or professional, had to be, I'm going to demonstrate security gaps and try to get, engagements or get your business, which is not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not the way to do it.
I've heard people talk about, hey, I'm going to sit out in this parking lot and get into all these networks and then go in and get them to hire me. And I'm like, they could call the police.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Why not go the way you want it to?
No. Mm-mm.
So, yeah, that one's weird, man. That's a weird story.
But I'm looking at it and I'm like, surely I'm missing something. And I did all of the links I could find. And so, maybe more will come out so that we won't feel so dirt.
Yeah.
I don't know. It makes no sense. So, but there's your thing where, it's like, that's some seriously bad behavior right there.
Mm-hmm.
Because this shouldn't even be this far if there was really a good reason for it.
Yep.
So, don't know, but not good. Glad that their protections, that's why you have layers. Layer 1, but layer 2 was, maybe the individual left it unlocked and then came back and saw them there and reported it. I don't know. I do know that an employee saw it happening and reported it based on the reporting on it. I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been called in to talk to anybody. So, but that's some serious bad behavior. And now the others, Yeah. The next one is uncertain. And then it kind of gets confusingly, still uncertain, but still confusingly less uncertain in the next one. So the third one, or the one after this.
But we're starting to see a trend here, though. But so this next one here happened a year ago, and we've been following it a little bit just to kind of see what might come out of it. And I don't have any other things to really report on it, so we're just going to go ahead and go with what we got. But this is a health analytics firm that said the hackers stole data because they hacked their MSP, and so obviously the MSP denies being the source of the breach. It's like, okay, lots of finger pointing going on here.
Yeah, well, and so they said that, so this is Barry Dunn, something. Barry Dunn is what it's known as, I think. And they said that they pay Reliable Networks for years to, manage their infrastructure, and it happened on their networks, and therefore, and then you have the MSP that says, no, you hired us to do technology consultation, on-demand IT support and training, maintenance and monitoring services. They saw in the monitoring there was activity and reported it to them.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you did not retain us to serve as your cybersecurity protection and prevention vendor.
Yep. So there's a mixed match of expectations.
This is why it is so important. We started that responsibility matrix. This is one of the reasons right here.
Yeah.
Who's responsible? And that gets back, it's a shared responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And they did share it in the class action lawsuit because, they always get one of those. And really the only people that make money on those is the lawyers. The class action lawsuit settled with both Barry Dunn and Reliable Networks. So that we're coming up on the deadline for people who were impacted to sign up to get up to $5,000 each.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty substantial breach. But that's the question I have is, obviously the contracts weren't enough to, if truly, and we do know this,
Mm-hmm.
that there are times where you are not hired to do all the things that you tell them they need done. I don't know, and so there's a Reddit conversation about this case, and I was looking to see if anybody had followed and knew about the disagreement between them, not just their insurance company settling this $7.25 million class action. Obviously, that's your insurance covenant, but now your insurance is going to go. Can you imagine what their insurance will be now?
Yeah.
The MSP through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
But in that Reddit discussion, there was an MSP that said that they had a client that blamed them one time like that. And the insurance company comes knocking. And they were like, here, boom, and laid down years worth, a big stack of paperwork where they did a quarterly assessment and notify the client they should put a VPN in front of their RDP because it's not protected. Here's what it costs. And the client would say, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time they proposed it. And they had all that documentation. And that's how they got attacked is the RDP. And they were able to say, ta-ta.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, documentation, it is so important. So important. When somebody says they want something, you should document that. When they say they don't want something, you should document that.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going through one right now. We're going through one right now where a client says, I didn't ask for that license. And I'm like, yes, you did. Because we got a document right here that you requested it. And I don't know. I don't know if they forgot or didn't want to pay for it. It's dollars. So I'm like, I don't understand why you're even fussing about it. But anyway.
Yeah. But that is the key is what's in the contracts.
Mm.
And you've got the SLA of what services am I providing? Where is the line drawn? And there has to be a line somewhere. It's and we'll get to that in just a second. You can't just move all the risk over to somebody else. That's what we try to explain to people in the SRAs that we do. We're like, okay, you got this risk. What are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. You've got choices. What are you going to do? And if they're going to transfer it to a third party, that doesn't mean it's gone from you. It just means it's reduced and you've inserted a new risk that is less than the one you have. So I don't know. I would love to see how this settled.
Yeah.
The BAA probably had indemnity in it and that's their insurance is doing it. But you got to wonder how that was settled because if they're doing that joint, civil settlement, they had to have fought between them before now.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the bad thing is you got the client saying the breach happened because your systems got breached and it caused us to be breached. And then the MSP's like, no, that didn't happen. Like none of our other clients has an issue, only you. And we have no evidence to support what you're trying to even say.
Yeah. They were like, look, we see this activity on your server and that doesn't look good. So here it is. You should do something about it.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, the MSP, if all that's true, because I'm leaning toward the MSP's side here, if all that's true, the MSP completely got screwed. Because if they had to pay anything, they got screwed over.
Oh, if they didn't document their stuff properly and manage their contracts properly, that's on them.
Yeah, it is on them. It is on them.
So, you got screwed out of it, but the protections that would have protected you, what would have protected you, you didn't do. So you kind of shot yourself there. And you need to understand what is in your SLA and what is in your BAAs.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, well, we always talk about it. Oh, just sign the contract. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, on a similar note, though, it is very common, especially in small MSPs, that they'll go grab an agreement they find somewhere. Mm-hmm. And there are groups out there that put sample agreements and contracts out there. They always tell you, like, have this reviewed by your attorney. Don't just take it and use it. Now, how many people actually do that? Probably a small number. They're like, oh, somebody already developed this and some other attorneys already looked at it, so I'm good. But there's always, nuances and different state laws and all this other stuff, so it needs to be done. But that possibly, could be something that happened here where they maybe had a contract. They just had something that was more of a template.
Yeah, and as an MSP, well, any BA also has to understand contracts in 3 different methods. You got to have upstream to a covered entity, upstream to a business associate, and then downstream to a business associate. Yeah. It is complicated.
It is. And don't think because of the size of the organization that matters, that they got all their, ducks in a row. Some of the biggest arguments I've had have been with massive organizations.
Yeah. And it's because for so long, those contracts were more or less paperwork. Mm-hmm. They're not anymore. HIPAA was more or less paperwork to most people. It cannot be anymore.
No.
So you don't have to worry about HIPAA. You have to worry about security.
Yep.
And if you're not, taking care of it, well, we've talked about that a few times.
Yep.
So you ready to move on to the other one? Because the other one gets interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is a business associate that is being sued by a covered entity over failure to secure protected health information. Okay. Now, there's a big difference here. The other MSP just sold IT services. Mm-hmm. This one sells managed compliance.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then they have certification and attestations and has like a little HIPAA logo on their website along with high trust and all kinds of other things. But like we said before, those really mean nothing in the end. Because and I mean, this is between the two of them. And I mean, they haven't even sent out their letter yet. As far as I know, it hadn't been put on the OCR. The company that has the breach is their MTL is the abbreviation they use, but it's
Molecular Testing Labs.
Okay.
Yeah. So Molecular Testing Labs, they're in Vancouver, Washington.
Yes. And so they have a data breach. And according to what's been filed.
Yeah.
Now,
And this just happened. Just to let everybody know, this just happened. Like March?
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
a couple months ago.
Yeah, this is all coming down the pipe at the same time here. So they have a breach, and their managed service provider entirety, NTIRETY, it's an interesting name. Entirety. Anyway, so they're suing them and saying that they had a forensic investigation done, and it determined that there were, quote, significant deficiencies, shortcomings, and omissions in the security practices and procedures which were exploited by the threat actor. And then they went on to claim that Entirety was unable to provide material support for several weeks, and when support was provided, it was conducted, quote, slowly and incompetently, which this is not a tiny, I got a guy size business. I mean, it looks like, I think it was listed as having like a couple hundred employees.
Yeah, this is a massive MSP.
Yeah. And then it says MTL claims that the BAA required Entirety to provide support and assist with the response to a breach and help mitigate harmful effects, which they do usually say. And here's another kicker is now I see a lot of them that say, not only, you're supposed to help me, but basically you've got to communicate with me this way. You've got to do, there's a lot of very specific things that it's saying. And until I read this, it didn't occur to me that the way that language is, it could mean that you're going to do it for, what that is not an additional fee. That could be argued because it says you're going to do it and you sign it. Mm-hmm. But Entirety said to them, okay, first of all, they're slow and incompetent, they claim. And then they say, well, we're going to have to charge you for the work. Now, that's not uncommon, depending on what your contract is, David, you would be in the same pickle.
Yeah. I mean, most of the ones I've seen, they provide security to prevent something from happening. But if there is anything that happens, typically it starts becoming a charge at that point. Like we'll provide, for example, level 1 response, meaning we'll try to block it from happening. We'll remediate when it gets quarantined and all that. But if it's beyond that, if there's an actual breach, an actual successful ransomware attack, then all that cleanup is not included. All that's an additional cost.
Right. And the question is, could that be interpreted by an attorney that you have agreed that you will provide that assistance and it never mentions that additional charge?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that everybody should be looking into.
Yeah. So
I was like, whoa, hello.
Yeah, we're back to those contracts and agreements again.
Yep. But I mean, this shows the importance of them. So according to them, they signed, according to MTL, because Entirety has not, as far as I could find, said anything. They signed a business associate agreement in September 2018. And the terms required them to establish and implement appropriate safeguards for any protected health information handled by the firm in connection with the services it provides. And those safeguards were a requirement of the HIPAA security rule, which the BAA always says you're going to follow. Mm-hmm. And it also had the indemnification in it, which we'll get to in a minute, that they would indemnify, defend, and hold harmless against losses and expenses incurred as a result caused by their negligence. And so they sent them a thing saying, you were negligent, you're going to need to start giving me money. And nothing's happened, so now they're taking legal action. Mm-hmm. But here's where things get a little different. Well, it gets a lot different. Because to me, this is the core of the entire conversation that the other one didn't include. Well, there's two pieces. One is they sell compliance management. managed compliance, managed IT, and managed compliance. So you're saying you're doing it. If they paid for that, which still don't know, then that's a whole different ballgame. But second here, they got a forensics firm. You know this lab is not a forensics company. In order for them to have forensics done, to have the information they clearly have because it's in the lawsuit, they've got some specific information. They say that their forensics investigation uncovered evidence that HIPAA security rule safeguards had not been implemented. So between those two things, it's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
You know, these guys have the little HIPAA certification, attestation, whatever you want to call it, on their website. They say high trust, and we don't need to go into that again. And, you know, they've got all of this
SOC 2,
stuff.
PCI, I mean, just all of them.
Yeah. And they, you know, it's like, and I'm confused by the fact that they were slow and incompetent in their response.
Yeah,
There's
but that's subjective. That's subjective, though. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you define slow and incompetent? I mean, they didn't call you back in 5 minutes. They didn't solve it in 5. I mean, what is it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, based on some of the things that they alluded to, it was kind of like, you know, probably somebody said, okay, let me get whoever needs to be available. And, you know, they were an extra charge and the wheels fell off.
Yeah. And I could also see, and I don't know this happened, but you know, when a client becomes a jerk, that your response can be slow.
Yeah, I'm not in any hurry.
Yeah,
well, it's also, you know, there's this one person we use to do breach response and they're not there. And, you know, they're on vacation. Who's going to do it? Yeah, there's a million things that could have happened there. But yeah. When you need somebody to do something for you, you don't start by being a jerk.
Right.
Or
well, it's
other
the whole
terms
shared
I would
responsibility.
use.
The whole shared responsibility kicks in during these types of times. Like, it's also a shared problem. So throwing mud at each other and being unruly is not going to get anybody anywhere. But I also wonder, you know, lawyers being lawyers, if they're not just throwing more things out there because that's more and more you have to defend.
I don't know about that part, but the fact that the forensics I want to see the forensics report. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Like slow and incompetent, you know, you can argue that all day. But
well, yeah, you want to know, you know, did I call and say I have a breach and they call me back the next day? That would get my attention. That I would call that slow.
Yeah.
Unreasonable.
But you know,
we don't know.
We talk about all the time how when you have a data breach, you need to plan to be down for days, if not weeks. I could see somebody saying, well, if you can't have me back up by the end of the day, then you're slow and incompetent.
Well, no, I would be worried about, or have you stopped the attack?
Yeah.
You know, that's what I want. If the attack is stopped, then it's a different story.
Yeah. We don't know any of that. And, you know, now I don't know about this company, but like me, we don't do, I'll call it like level 3 cybersecurity. Like we're not out there fighting the people out of the systems necessarily. Right. Yeah. We go and we hire other firms that do that because we can't staff those types of people.
Yeah. They're not
for various
cheap,
reasons. Yeah. They're not cheap, but we're also, you know, that's just not the lane we're in. So it could be that, and this happens a lot where an MSP, they don't have a relationship with those type of folks until they need it. And so then it becomes, well, you know, we've got to onboard you and we got to do this, we got to do that. And before we can talk to your client. And so then all this stuff starts slowing to a crawl because that, you know, you never called them until you needed them. I don't know that that's the case here, but that happens in the smaller MSPs all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we run into it and you know, when we'll say to people, you know, you should have an arrangement in place for people that like do mailings for notification letters for forensics folks. The problem, though, is now all of these cybersecurity companies, the insurance companies, it's a little squirrely to me what they do, but it's like in some cases, I think they even own the companies that they make you use for response. So you don't get to use the people that you already have an agreement with. So I can bring in forensics people immediately, but no, the insurance company, you've got to notify 42 people, get all of this paperwork handled, and then they're going to come in. In the meantime, you don't even know if you can stop the hackers.
In some cases, the forensics folks are like, and I don't blame them, it's a business, but they'll say, you got to pay me X number of dollars a month to have me there in case you need me. And then I'm sitting there going, I've never needed you.
Yeah.
But I'm paying for you to be, potentially on call. It's a hard thing for an MSP to do that.
Oh yeah. And then when I do need you though, I don't care what you charge me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a very complex environment that we operate in. Is that if we're doing our jobs, then, we would need to have some sort of regular income, not crisis income. And you, especially in MSPs, you wouldn't know they're doing their jobs if they're doing their jobs. You shouldn't be having to deal with them if it's being done properly. That means you're protected, your support is handled, everything's good. That means it's good. But does it necessarily if they're not actually doing the work? So, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
But that's why you vet them.
Yeah. Well, not just vet them, but you should, just like when you do your annual risk assessment, you should also do some type of annual, re-vetting of your vendors, because things change, different employees, different owners, just different tools, different systems. There's all kind of different things that happens. But just for the people that are listening, if you're not in the MSP space, here's what we call it. When somebody sells you a service that they don't deliver on, we call that vaporware. You're paying for vapor. It doesn't exist, which unfortunately it's fairly common that somebody's like, yes, we're providing you with A through Z, but what they don't tell you is they're not doing, S through Z.
That's right.
Or they intended to do it and just never got around to it. Who knows? But it's not uncommon for things to be rolled into this package deal and half of it not get done.
That is correct. 100%. You just never, ever, in some cases, I used to work in software, and more than once, the sales folks would sell something and not tell us what they sold. Or what they told us that they sold is not what the client thought they were buying.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I'm the one left with, the big pile of smoking stuff in my lap.
Yeah. And
it does become exceptionally complicated to walk that fine line between not killing somebody. Just kidding.
Well, there's also sometimes, like, we do this where there are services that we offer upon request. So, for example, we might do an annual assessment of some sort, but it's like you need to request that, because we'll send you a thing and say it's time for that, but we're not going to chase you down.
Yeah, it's not my job.
and force you to do this. Like, it's time to have this done, but you need to request when you want to have it done. It's something we provide for you, but you got to own some of this. Like, you got to want it.
That's another reason that we have to do, we learned years ago that when we're doing an SRA with somebody, we have to give them deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
And if you push the deadlines, we'll reach a point where we draw a line in the sand and say, okay, whatever you've given us now, even though we kept nagging you to give us stuff, whatever we have right now is what we're going to do the report on. And we're going to say you didn't give us the stuff.
Yeah. If you ghosted, I'm posting.
Okay, there we went. So, but that is the big thing that takes us in that discussion that I mentioned on Reddit. That it's so important that you understand what you're committed to doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we weren't clear about it, I had to suck it up and deal with it. But I can't wait to do work for 6 months, and then you're going to tell me it took a year to do your SRA. It's a moment in time. So you're wanting to give me stuff at the beginning of the year and the end of the year and say, okay, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. So just because people may say they know how to do this stuff and all the certifications are grand. However, what I always answer everybody and say is, you know what? Anthem was high trust certified, just recertified when they had their data breach of 80 million people. My guess is Change Healthcare also had the same thing, and they had 190 million people so far. So it's not about those certifications when things happen. It's about what went wrong when things happen.
Mm-hmm.
If things went wrong, but you were prepared to handle them, that's what you can work with. And there was an article that was a link to it in that Reddit group that was by Kirkpatrick and Price. So it's Who Owns Risks. And it was a really interesting article that talked about when you engage an MSP, you've got to understand this is shared responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And, it doesn't remove the risk. It just shifts how you deal with it. And I've heard so many people, I've had doctors yell at me, why did I hire all these people if I still got to do all this work? And I'm like, because it's your business.
Yeah.
All you did was bring in specialized help because you would never be able to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you're distributing the risk. You brought in a helper. But I love this line in here that they had is, after it talked about you must clearly define the scope of your responsibilities. Everybody must understand. And when we have this new responsibility matrix. And I remember when I sent it to you and you're like, well, it's right, but wow. Because there's a lot to worry about.
Yeah.
And we keep adding things to it, but we go through and say, who's responsible for every piece of this function? And, it's interesting. And that's why you have to know what's in your BAAs. You have to know what's in your SLAs. You have to know anybody that you've negotiated something different with. You have to know upstream and downstream. You need to understand it. And if you don't understand it, you're putting your business at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like we always say, if people don't trust me, I need to be told where the bodies are buried so I have a chance of protecting you. Right?
Yeah.
And yours not a lot different, in what you do for a living. And if I can't trust you, I'm not going to tell you that. We have to have that trust amongst each other that I got your back and I'm not going to lie to you. That's where I always loved that back in the day when I would do support and I would tell somebody, okay, click here, now type CMD. And you hear clickety, 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 clickety. I'm like, where are you going?
That's a whole lot of CMDs.
The keys are just going, blah, 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 click, click. I'm like, okay, I thought we were already where we would.
I know.
Let's
What are
just
you
stop
doing?
right here and reboot on what we're doing. I wish I could get a connection into you, but your internet's down. So, Anyway, it's always fun to do that, but it's the same thing. If there's no understanding, then communication didn't happen. We still stick with that one.
I love those calls because you'll be talking to somebody and you're like, all right, do you see that button up there, this blue? All right, right beside, no, don't click. Why did you click on that? Well, I thought you was going to tell me to click on it. No, I was telling you that's where it's at because I need you to see what's beside that. That's where I need you.
Yeah, I have that same problem in my own house. I know you know what I mean.
Yeah. Anytime my wife says, can you help me with something? I can promise you within 60 seconds, you're going to hear me say, would you stop clicking?
Yeah. Yeah. Just let me drive. Yeah. Just move away from the keyboard and the mouse. Hands up.
Yeah. No kidding.
And
Red Panda.
But the point that they added here is you must remember that you cannot outsource your reputation. Your reputation will always be at risk and your responsibility. It's up to you to vet them and hold them to a standard.
Yup.
And
put that on a t-shirt.
I know, right? We should do that. But that is where we have to be, folks, there needs to be a clear understanding of who's responsible for what. Your contracts have to be clear about what they're going to do. Now I'm worried about helping in a breach. You know how that goes. And now everybody that listens to this is going to be like, oh, man, because you're going to be able to change that.
Yep.
And how would you word it and all of this? Now you got to go talk to lawyers. But for the most part, if you're not documenting it, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time that's handy is in a criminal trial. I didn't do that, sir. I am not even there. There is no documentation showing I was even there that day. Okay, That would be helpful. If you're being in that kind of scenario. But with these, I have to prove that I did do that work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another reason that we say, this is one, and I know you work with us on this. Chris is like, I'm still working with David on blah, 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 on the reporting. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's the bane of my existence. Oh my gosh. I don't understand why some of these tools won't put reports out that are meaningful.
Right. And it's the tool that's the problem, not what we're asking for. It makes sense, but now you got to figure out how to get it. But this is why I tell people, oh, well, IT takes care of all of that. But how do you know? You don't have any reports showing they're doing it. And what if, 2 years from now and I ask, what were they doing today? How are you going to give it to them? Because most of the tools that you guys have, it's not historic information. It changes periodically.
Yeah. If it is, it's a limit. I mean, at best you might have a year, but if you come back and say, give me something from 5 years ago, I'm like, nah, that doesn't exist.
Nah.
But we pull reports and store them. I won't tell my clients this because I make them do it, but we pull reports and store them in case something comes up. We can go back and look at them. But we do tell our clients it's your responsibility to get these reports.
Yeah,
and put them in your documentation and all that.
Yeah, you should be maintaining that with your privacy and security documentation.
Yep.
And
so I don't want that responsibility. I do it, for our own internal reasons, but that doesn't mean we won't drop the ball and maybe forget a report or miss a report. Or as we're going through now, we change vendors and some of them are like, oh yeah, if you need a report, just run that through your SIM. And I'm like, but every client doesn't have a SIM. As a matter of fact, very few of them have one.
I know.
So it's, great tools, but that's the challenge when you're using these tools that are, for the big guys, because all the big guys have these reporting SIMs that they can run everything through.
Yeah, you're going to have to start building all those robots.
I'm working on that.
Yeah. All right, that's what we've had to, we're looking at every little step of the way. Where can I use AI?
Mm-hmm.
And reviewing all your business associate agreements might be a place to start right now.
Yeah.
But just remember, the big things are, no matter what side of the equation you're on, you're taking risks. And you want to be clear what each side of the equation is responsible for doing. And you can't just assume that even the CEO of the company is not going to do something squirrely. And that one is so weird.
Yeah.
Please, somebody make sure we get to hear the details of how that works out. But just know, I mean, these things are happening already, and they're happening more often, and they're also very stressful, and they drain your resources. So, yeah, like you said, I'm paying for something every month and I don't need it until I need it, and then I'll pay anything I can to make it go away. Because ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. That's, same thing with, we're basically providing services that are, your ounce of cure. And it's the same thing with like your health. Like you can't wait until you have a heart attack to start taking your health seriously. But that's basically what people do in cybersecurity. They wait until they have an attack or a data breach or something that's close to it. And then they're like, oh, now I need to take this seriously.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that in those reports that the statistics show the spending for cybersecurity goes up significantly after a major attack.
Yeah.
So you've lost all of that.
And if you've gotten grazed by a cyber incident, you better get on it.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and they're like, we almost had a data breach and wow, we just happened to miss it. Thank goodness. We'll call you if we need you. And I'm like, what?
All right. Yeah. All right, then. All right. Both sides of the equation. And we're all on both sides of the equation. We have to do a better job if you want to make things smoother and less chaotic in your life. But, if you're going to get in a fight with each other on the first phone call, it's never going to go well. That is not the time to let that start. So just remember, it's also if you're having a disagreement with one of those providers, now would be the time to smooth that over in case you need them, even if you're going to get somebody else. Do not make them angry.
All right. That is our show for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in again next week when there's no telling what we'll be talking about. And remember, for Donna and myself, the HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.